Welcome to Novara Live. Coming up tonight, we've got a special report from Stephen Methven, who is back from a Defend Our Juries protest in Westminster, during which multiple people were arrested, seemingly simply for sitting down. We speak to a Palestinian student trying to get an education in the UK, and we'll be joined live by actress Juliet Stevenson to speak about her campaign work for Gaza. And lastly, we'll discuss how the Greens will fare against a more competent Labour leader. I'm Helena, aka NoJusticeMTG, and I'll be joined later tonight for Ladies' Night by Dalia, Gebrial. If you'd like to support our work, you can sign up at novaramedia.com/support. You can also listen to the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And as always, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure that you let us know what you think in the comments section down below. In this country, over 3,500 people have been arrested under the Terrorism Act since last summer. Most of them have committed the heinous, dangerous and villainous act of holding bits of paper on which they've written just 7 words. Those words being, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine action. Today, many of those charged were due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court. In fact, over 1,500 cases were listed to have a hearing today. That's according to Defend Our Juries. But it all went a bit pear-shaped. Novara Stephen Methven was down at the court and he joins me now. So Stephen, can you take us through the events of the day?
I can. It was a very, very bizarre from my point of view, I have to say. So what happened is that around 1,500 people were scheduled to appear, or hearings for them were scheduled at Westminster Magistrates Court today. So those are people who have been charged under Section 13, largely, of the Terrorism Act for holding up signs. 1,500 people is a lot of people to process through the courts in a single day. Of course, it was just an administrative moment, but even so, that's a lot of administration to do in a single day. And it's a real indication of actually like the size of the problem that's going to be facing the court, because of course you have the administrative hearings, but then you have the actual ones that come a bit further down the road. Those hearings were then apparently cancelled. Letters were written to a law firm saying, please advise your clients that the hearings are no longer taking place, have been postponed till October. Other people got the most crazy, contradictory, Kafkaesque letters you can imagine, where it said, at the top of the letter, you must attend this hearing. And then further down, you must attend this hearing. And then a little bit lower down, do not attend this hearing, all in a single letter. And then having been told that the hearings were not going to go ahead, suddenly they were relisted, and suddenly it appeared that there were now over 2,000 that had been listed. And indeed, I have this document here, which is from Defend Our Juries. I haven't been able to verify it myself. There are 2,100 hearings on here, which were all supposed to be processed today. So what happened then was that Defend Our Juries obviously were like, well, there's going to be, there are these hearings, 1,500 people at the start are supposed to turn up, so let's do something there. And what they'd planned to do was to erect a stage where there would be sort of some poetry read, some statements made, all as I understand it, to be perfectly legal until a certain point at which people would then do a law-breaking action under the Terrorism Act. Now, some of you will have seen that I went to New Scotland Yard earlier this month, where it was the first action where Defend Our Juries kind of escalated their tactics. So instead of holding up signs, which is a breach of Section 13 of the Terrorism Act, which carries a 6-month sentence and can be dealt with in a magistrate's court, they vocally expressed support for Palestine action, and indeed they encouraged and some expressed membership of Palestine action, and they encouraged the police to join the organization as well, an organization which, by the way, has been disbanded as far as we know. So that's a Section 12 violation, and that carries 14 years, a maximum of a 14-year sentence. And because it has such a hefty sentence, it's the kind of charge which largely has to be dealt with in the Crown Court, which would mean a jury. So that was an escalation in tactics, which would mean that, the magistrates' courts had been sort of flooded with these Section 13 offences, and now they were going to start going in front of juries and flooding the Crown Court, what most people think of as the criminal court. So there was some law breaking, I understand, that was planned for today, where people would do a similar thing, deliberately breach Section 12 of the Act. The police put out a statement last night advising people not to do it, that they would be making arrests. They, excuse me, cordoned off an area around the magistrates' court where it was an order in place not to be allowed to wear face masks. None of these people, as far as I can remember, ever wear face masks. But again, it's sort of, it really struck me when I saw the police statement. And I was like, even the police don't believe this is terrorism, right? This is like,
We had those interviews, didn't we? Was it Harry who did interviews with the police about this stuff, saying that they felt really kind of awkward about doing the arrests?
Exactly. Those were anonymous individual police officers. But this is like the Met as a kind of organization. If you think that there's going to be literally perhaps the largest gathering of terror offenders the country has ever seen outside a court.
Terrorist
thinking
grannies.
Like helicopters, SWAT teams, negotiators to negotiate the signs out of their hands. None of that occurred.
Get Benedict Cumberbatch in to do hostage negotiations.
Exactly. None of that occurred, obviously, because, nobody, not even the police, believes that these people who are being charged under the Terrorism Act are anything like terrorists at all. So that was the setup to what happened today. And then, it all went a bit strange.
Well, fair enough then, fair enough. Now, obviously, I believe you were down at the events today, so we've got some footage we'll be able to show you right now. A former government lawyer, Tim Crosland, explained what the plan for the process today had been.
We had a plan, and the first part of that plan was to have poems and songs in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Police knew that was the plan. I was asked by an officer earlier on, if you're going to do things like that, can you please be the other side of that metal barrier? We moved to the other side of that metal barrier. And then two people came to put up a little podium. And it really was a very, very little podium, that side of the barrier. The purpose of that podium was so that people reading their poems and speaking could be heard. Because you've got a big crowd here, without that you can't be heard. As they were putting the barrier up, the podium up, they were handcuffed behind their back, arrested, one dragged off in acute pain for putting up the podium, and the police saying you're being arrested under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act. It was an opportunity for people to read poems.
So setting up a stage is terrorism now?
Stage apparently is terrorism now. There was somebody once the stage and the amplification were confiscated by the police, someone stepped in just to try and get the attention of people and to say, we haven't got a stage, we haven't got amplification, but the show's going to go on. She was arrested. And I heard a police officer say, she must be the organizer. I happen to know she's not an organizer, right? She was arrested and handcuffed for saying, essentially good morning to people to get their attention. Nothing more than that. We're at a point not just where you're, banned under a Public Order Act for trying to speak about Gaza. You are a terrorist if you are trying to draw attention to the genocide that takes place. The only way not to be a terrorist is either to express support for the genocide and the burning up of our planet, or to be silent about it.
Stephen also asked Crosland about the escalation in Defend Our Juries' tactics.
Yes, so you could say the court system has sort of fallen at the first hurdle here. This was meant to be a simple administrative hearing of a summary-only offence, and it is chaos. Couldn't even get a message to people that there'd been an adjournment. But as you say, people today being arrested under Section 12 for putting up podiums, for planning to read poems, not even actually reading the poems. Well, Section 12 is jury trial, Crown Court trial, up to 14 years imprisonment. And this is at the same time that Andy Burnham and his government is dealing with a crisis about people convicted of violent offences being released early from prison, apparently to make way for pensioners who are planning to read poems. That's the sort of situation we've got now.
59-year-old white women are the average terrorists in this country.
Pensioner of conscience, the average terrorist, yes.
How dare they? A conspiracy to commit poetry, potentially, I don't know. Now, pretty quickly, police started arresting those who'd come down to the court, but it wasn't very clear why.
What section have you been arrested under?
Section 12, just for being here. I haven't even said any words.
You haven't?
I've just been arrested for Section 12 for sitting on the pavement without saying anything or displaying any article.
Yeah, so you're not holding a sign, you're not wearing anything that would be a Section 13 breach.
Really no grounds for arrest whatsoever, and I can't wait to get my wrongful arrest payout from the police.
Have the police explained to you what subsection of Section 12 you're being arrested under?
You can ask this lady here.
I'm stressed at work and I need to walk away from this.
Officer, what part of Section 12 is the arrest?
This is outrageous.
She doesn't want to tell us.
So you weren't chanting anything, you didn't say anything?
Clapped. I clapped.
Are your actions in the public interest?
That was it.
Is this what you were expecting when you sat down on the pavement today?
Absolutely not. I was here just to watch. Yeah.
You're about to get lifted away. How are you feeling about that?
Defiant. Yeah.
Any message for the government?
What do I say? Just, I don't know, stop this before it's too late. Stop this slide into authoritarianism before it's too late.
Thank you.
This is crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Hold on. Pick her up safely. You're going to dislocate her shoulders. What's the matter with you? Haven't you ever done any manual handling training? Shame on you, Coco the Clown.
I'm not holding a placard. I have not breached the law in any way. On what basis, under what law are you arresting me? No, you've said Section 12. Under what section of Section 12 are you arresting me? Please be specific. I have not broken the law. Under what part of Section 12 are you arresting me?
What section is she being arrested under? 12. For what? But what was her expression of support?
Wait, listen. When we get you into the carrier.
I am not committing an offence. You tell me under what
What's your
part
name?
of
What's
section.
your
I'm
name?
not telling
Okay,
you my
that's
name.
fine.
Under what
Okay.
part of section 12
My colleague's
are you arresting
my colleague's arrested.
me? You
Are you
need
refusing
to know
to get
the
up?
law. You need to
refusing
know
to-
the law.
Thank you.
Yeah, shame on you.
Anyway, I'm standing here.
Must be proud of yourselves, eh?
What are you arresting them for? You've got no reason to arrest them.
Oh, I wonder what the Free Speech Union is saying about this, Stephen. I wonder when they'll talk about the fact people are getting arrested for claps apparently now. I wonder if when we'll get the screed about the movement towards, the policing of speech from people like that. No. So we don't know when that might happen. Anyway, I mean, this is clearly a much higher threshold for arrests than we've seen previously.
Or a
lower
threshold.
threshold,
Yeah. I mean, it was, look, I was there when many of those arrests happened. And in fact, I was interviewing somebody when I suddenly saw the police begin arresting people, and I hadn't seen a single sign. So, normally in these protests, it's when the signs come out that the arrests begin, but I hadn't seen any signs. Then behind me, that second woman started to get arrested, and so I broke off the interview to go and talk to her and film it. And the claim I heard from some in the crowd was that the police had said that they had been chanting something that was prescribed. Now, there may have been some chanting at another part of the sort of area that I was in. I didn't hear it, and I certainly didn't hear it anywhere near me. And look, those two women both said they weren't chant. They didn't say anything. They didn't chant anything. They weren't holding anything. They clearly weren't holding anything. And the really important point here is that they have absolutely no reason to lie about that, because the whole point of being there for purposes of breaking the law is to get arrested for breaking that law. And breaking the law for them is an act of conscience, which they do in order to preserve what they take to be in order to oppose what they take to be a huge degradation of our civil liberties when it comes to speech, when it comes to gathering, assembly, and also when it comes to direct action, which is how they regard, Palestine Action as a direct action group, one in a very long tradition of direct action. So they have no reason to lie. So I think when those women said, we weren't doing anything, we literally just clapped, there's absolutely no reason to disbelieve them as far as I'm concerned. Now, whether clapping is now supporting a terrorist group is a really good question, because perhaps somebody did chant somebody and they clapped, and that clap counts as a support for their statement, which was a statement in support of a terrorist group. It would be unimaginable to me if that is the threshold the police are now applying. What if somebody nods their head? Is that going to be support for a prescribed organisation? What if you're just like walking across the street talking on the phone and you say yes very loudly as somebody's makes a statement about Palestine action? It is loop-de-loo. I think a few years ago, this situation where as Tim Crossland, or as I said maybe when I was talking to Tim Crossland, where the average terrorist in this country is a 59-year-old white woman who holds up a sign, or who sits down and claps, or is proximate in some way to someone who says something, would have been completely unimaginable.
Literally. Well, unfortunately, Shabana Mahmood's panopticon shall continue until morale improves, or the Shabanopticon, shall we call it. Now, at one point, our producer Jack tried to get some answers from the police about why people were being arrested.
If I sit down, will you arrest me?
No. What's the answer to that, officer? No. Why not?
Just the reason why we arrested him.
So why have other people been arrested for sitting down today?
You'd have to ask them.
I'd have to ask the people who are being arrested why they've been arrested. There doesn't seem a great deal of logic to that, officer.
The professionalism of the Metropolitan Police on full display yet again. Now, the police say 117 people were arrested today under a combination of Section 12 and 13 charges. What do you think the impact of all of this is going to be, Stephen?
I mean, I think there's actually no telling. I will say something about that interaction between Jack and that police officer. I don't think it's a failure of professionalism on the part of the police there. I think it's actually not knowing what it is that they're supposed to be doing, like it being completely mystifying, even to the officers there. The reason they can't answer the question is because they don't know, I really believe, why it is that they're arresting these people. They're doing something. They're around, someone who's saying something that they shouldn't be saying, which is a prescribed statement. But they do not know what the threshold is themselves. And I suspect that the police are just under... from some parts of government, perhaps, under some pressure to continue doing what is actually a form of madness, like literally like insane asylum sort of stuff. Because what's going to happen is that many of those people, I think, who were arrested today will win compensation for false arrests. Because I find it very hard for the police to... I find it very hard to see how the police are going to be able to maintain the position that actually they were expressing support for a prescribed group, when I don't think anybody saw it, and I have no reason to disbelieve them. But Defend Our Juries is obviously going to continue to escalate its tactics. I was there in the summer when the sign protests began in very small numbers, and I saw it go from 50 to 500 to 1,000 to 1,500. Just step by step, more and more people were prepared to break the law in order to stand against the prescription of Palestine action. When I was at Scotland Yard, I think there were maybe 11 people who did the escalatory thing of a Section 12 breach. I know 117 people were arrested today, according to the Met. That's a lot of people, and that's tenfold what we saw just a month ago. If those charges go through the Crown Courts, I don't know how they're going to deal with them, because the Crown Court is already extremely packed, extremely busy, falling apart. People were saying we have to get rid of juries because we're not doing cases fast enough. Andy Burnham has abandoned that apparently, so that's good. But yeah, really, this is going to take some kind of government change of heart. And Andy Burnham is now in charge. He must be looking at this. He must be thinking, this is kind of idiotic. I don't want this on my record. I don't want Yvette Cooper's, I'm going to say it, stupidity to be a mar on my time as
Well, he's not going to deal with it. Like, he wants to focus on bus prices and on cost of living and domestic policy, and having to have his hands tied up by previous silly decisions made by former members of the government are only going to distract him from his kind of true things he actually wants to get done in this country, especially when, he'd already wanted to scrap the jury reforms. I believe that was briefed out by somebody else from the government, because again, they don't want to have to deal with constitutional reform that distracts from the economic
And that
policy.
people will be strongly, strongly opposed to as well.
This stuff is going viral internationally. The point where
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson is talking about people getting arrested for holding signs in support of Palestine. This is the situation that we're in.
And let me just say something about Shabana Mahmood, who's still the Home Secretary, and for whatever reason has decided that she would like her name plastered all over this mess as well. If you want to do law and order, which I think is something that she does want to do, what you don't want to do is cram the courts with pensioners and retired people and, peaceniks and students who are protesting. You don't want to see thousands of people in the Crown Court. And I think, I don't know. It's obviously a bigger undertaking as a 14-year sentence attached to a Section 12 breach. But I think that there will probably be a lot of people who are prepared to do it because they feel so strongly about the danger of this prescription and the kind of slippery slope that it creates. And I think they're right to feel that that's
if this was a country in the global south, they would be admonished by the global north for doing things. But, under the guise of being a quote-unquote liberal democracy, these people get away with it.
Yeah.
Stephen, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks.
Now, there has been some other Palestine Action news today. Palestine Action co-founder Huda Amori has been given permission to appeal the prescription at the Supreme Court today. That hearing will take place in the autumn, with Amori saying this. The Supreme Court's decision to grant permission to appeal comes as hundreds more ordinary people are arrested today under terror laws simply for saying they oppose genocide and support Palestine Action, adding to the more than 3,500 arrests to date for this entirely peaceful protest. Many more reportedly arrested today, despite not expressing support for Palestine Action, including people who are simply setting up a stage or reading poems about Gaza. This further evidences our case that the prescription of Palestine Action has become a vehicle for a far broader crackdown on expressions of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Dalia, this all seems a little bit like that it is going to presumably push this back up the news story again, which Andy Burnham clearly doesn't want.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that we're in a position now where it is going to go to the Supreme Court. I was chatting to Stephen earlier today, and he sort of suggested that this was because I think Burnham is a lot savvier than perhaps we might think, and it's a way for him to kind of get this off the table in terms of the media, the news as a news item, and but do it without being seen to show political support for not arresting like thousands of pensioners for holding up a sign because it doesn't look good. And, kind of overall on what this means going forward for us, I don't like to necessarily say, oh, gosh, we're becoming like authoritarian regimes, because it kind of suggests that Britain has been this like innocent bastion of liberalism and it would never dream of sowing the seeds for authoritarianism globally, when actually that is kind of what it's done for its at least recent history. But I do think that we need to understand that what is being done today to the Defend Our Juries protesters and also to the Palestine Action protesters is bit for bit directly out of the playbook of any government that we would broadly consider to be authoritarian. So, whether you're talking about Russia, whether you're talking about China, this use of anti-terror law in order to crack down on political dissent. When the Russian government closes down all independent media, it doesn't say we're doing this because we don't believe in a free press and because this is an authoritarian regime. They say we're shutting down these media outlets because they are supportive of terror, or they are sympathetic to terrorism. We have to and we have to ask ourselves, why is it that the government is so fixed and hell-bent on pursuing the specific crime or allegation of terrorism? Because, if you want to lock up the Palestine Action protesters, if you want to punish them for what they've done, there are laws in which you could have done that under, criminal damage. They could have just, raised the charge of criminal damage. It probably would have gone through a lot more easily without as much controversy. But they are going specifically after terror legislation for multiple reasons. The first one is because when you bring something under the purview of terrorism, of terror legislation, it almost exists outside of normal legal reality. So like all of these principles that we have built up over many years, whether it's around, state surveillance or around detention or around the right to private legal advice, all of these things suddenly exit the building. And so it's a way for the government to be able to basically get around the pesky fact of core legal rights and core legal frameworks. And so, and that's something that people are willing to accept, the idea that we would suspend normal due process when we're talking about when we're in the aftermath of massive attacks where lots of people have died because people are scared and angry and traumatized. And those of us who have sort of been ringing the alarm on this crackdown of civil liberties in the name of the counter-terror, were always very unpopular for doing that because it was seen as not having compassion for victims, or it was seen as not taking terrorism seriously, or the pain that has been caused of it seriously. But this is exactly why, because what happens is when you expand the category of terrorism, you expand the remit of the government to basically bypass traditional legal protections. And then you can also introduce this secondary crime of supporting a terror organization, and that's when we get into the territory of thought crime. That's when we get into the territory of people being criminalized for things that they think or ideologies they might hold. And there's no other existing legal framework other than maybe hate speech framework to really persecute people for what they think and if they dissent in their thought against what the government perhaps wants. Whereas when you introduce this idea of supporting a terror organization as being something punishable by years in prison, or that opens you up to being surveilled by the government, to having your devices seized, to having your right to privacy compromised, then suddenly, through the back door, we have a crackdown on freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and freedom of the press. And so it has been a drip feed, but it is not surprising to me that this is where we have ended up 25 years after the amendment of the counter-terror legislation.
And how different is this to Marco Rubio exploiting this stuff through NSPM 7 to crack down on people who they say are terrorists, need to be expunged from society, basically, in terms of their organisation. It's really, really damaging to the social fabric. The children of the UK lead normal lives, and guaranteed access to an education is a privilege some of us take for granted. For the children and for the teenagers of Gaza, it's a very different story. Even with the so-called ceasefire brokered between Israel and the Palestinian resistance, bombs continue to rain down on the enclave. This means that even the idea of studying is well beyond many Gazans who are desperate to go back to their lives before Israel's genocide began. Many countries across Europe have offered these people a lifeline, programs to evacuate them from Gaza and bring them to Europe to study at some of the best universities in the world. However, for these gifted students to be able to come to Britain, they either need to have full scholarships or to be able to fund themselves, something that's impossible for them to achieve, given the extortionate cost of the subsistence in the besieged enclave in which 95% of higher educational buildings have been destroyed or damaged. Luckily, some celebrities have tried to come to the rescue. 20 UK celebs have banded together with the Phoenix-based charity to organise a charity auction to be able to raise money to fund these students' costs to come here to study. Juliet, Stevenson, star of films like Truly Madly Deeply and Bend It Like Beckham, as well as many, many stage productions, is one of those donating items to the auction, and she joins me now to discuss the initiative. Juliet, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you.
Hi, good to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, why was it important for you to get involved with this project?
Well, for all the reasons you've just said, we take for granted that our kids or the students across the country, from 18 onwards are able to access, tertiary education and follow their dreams and study and so on. But the students in Gaza have already been through a sort of hellish 3 years of the entire infrastructure of their education being destroyed. All 7 Gazan universities have been destroyed, libraries, precious equipment, study spaces and so on. And people have been living in hunger, fear, grief, rage. And so many of these students have tried really hard to continue their studies. We have a situation now in which over 200 of them have been offered places by top British universities, which is fantastic. And the fact they have done this, these students have achieved these places not through any kind of charitable avenue, but because they have earned these places through academic merit. And on top of which, they've had to do this in incredible circumstances. We've heard stories of students climbing up mountains of rubble to try and reach a little bit of Wi-Fi signal, endangering themselves in the line of sniper fire of the Israeli, the IDF, or drone fire, just to get a bit of Wi-Fi to send their application into a university. One student crossed a very, very dangerous territory to get to a temporary Wi-Fi hub to sit an entrance exam, only for that Wi-Fi to collapse halfway through his exam. So it's just extraordinarily moving to think of what they've been through. But anyway, they have, over 200 have these places. But the British government, as you said, are saying that they can come only if they have fully funded scholarships. Well, I mean, how is a Gazan student supposed to do that? People are starving in Gaza. They haven't got the money to feed their families, let alone pay these large sums. And we're talking about a minimum of £17,000 per student. So, just as a start, and we hope it will be make a big substantial contribution, some of us have got together this auction. Well, Phoenix Space is the wonderful charity who have organised this auction. And originally the idea was that we should all donate an item that meant something to us from our own education. So I've given a book of poetry about poetry that I've had. I got it as a prize when I was at school when I was about 15, and I've had it on my bookshelves ever since. So I've donated that. But then after a while, some celebrities said, well, I don't have anything from my school days. So they have just been free then to donate all sorts of amazing things. So Gary Lineker is donating a football T-shirt that I think he's signed. Vanessa Redgrave's donating a very valuable necklace. There's lots and lots of different things in the auction, and we hope to raise a really substantial sum of money for these students so they can get to Britain to take up their places.
Now, given all the difficulties you just mentioned there in terms of the Gazans' ability to generate the funds themselves to be able to come to the UK to study, why do you think the government haven't stumped up some of the money themselves?
Well, I mean, look at what this government's relationship to Palestine and to Gaza has been for since the genocide began. I mean, we have been horrifically complicit in this genocide. We have continued to sell arms to Israel. That has not stopped. We are still selling arms to Israel. We are still selling parts for the F-35 bombers that, are the very bombers that are projected onto the people of Gaza and that have been responsible now for over 75,000 deaths, including 22,000 children, according to reports on the ground. So we are in many ways colluding. We have colluded, and this government has had a shocking and shameful record in relation to Gaza. We very, very much welcome that the Home Office have changed the visa application system so that students no longer have to produce biometric data, which was the case a year ago, and now they don't have to do that. So the Home Office has moved in the right direction, but it's kind of torturous to say to these students, you've got to produce these large sums of money, because there's no way they can do that. So if the government is not going to change their view on this, and we would appeal to them to do so, but if they're not, then we are asking everybody who is hearing this to either go to the auction and bid for something, or else to donate. I mean, if you don't want any of the auction items, that's fine, but please make a contribution, however small, and let's see just how much money we can raise for these students if the government are not going to change their policy.
Now, I've got to ask you now, we do have a new Prime Minister, and one who has obviously been a little bit more kind of forthright and in terms of apologising for Labour's slow and painful response to the genocide. What kind of action would you further like to see from Andy Burnham now that we've got someone new at the helm?
I mean, yes, I welcome the apology, but apology is completely meaningless unless it's put into action. Now is not the time for words. Words need to be followed up by action and a complete change of policy. So the first thing I would urge Andy Burnham to do is to stop selling arms to Israel. I mean, that is the obvious one. We should be employing sanctions towards the Israeli government, because that is the only way we will really hit them, is by sanctions and, boycotting and divestment. we have, hundreds and hundreds of British industries who are deeply implicated in commerce and trade with Israel. And the only way anything will work really is if we stand up and first of all stop selling arms and then hit them commercially, because I think that's honestly, one of the most effective ways we can make our feelings felt. But I mean, Andy Burnham is going to have to stand up and resist a very, very powerful lobby, which will be pressurizing him not to. When I heard your previous reporter talking about why this terrorist legislation has got as far as it has, I mean, I do agree with her, but what she didn't say, which I would say is the most significant thing, is that there is an extraordinarily influential and powerful lobby in this country that has argued and has in fact drawn up that legislation. And it's the same lobby who is urging, this government and Starmer's government to support the Israeli government in spite of this mass slaughter of its people. And so Burnham needs to stand up to that lobby. He needs to, access his moral muscle and make decisions that are about what he really believes in and not what he's doing to please a lobby that really has which has a lot of blood on its hands.
Obviously, for the last almost 3 years now, we saw the destruction of Gaza, the looting of the West Bank, the incursions into Lebanon. On a personal level, have you had any, in terms of your professional life, have you had any kind of backlash in terms of your personal support for the Palestinian cause?
I mean, obviously, I get messages of hatred and so on, but. I mean, I've been working all the way through. You don't know about the jobs you didn't get. You don't know about the people who don't want to employ you because of my position. But to be absolutely honest, it doesn't really matter to me. I know that I'm living through a period we've never witnessed a live streamed genocide before. That's been said many times. I mean, I have been so sort of reshaped and altered by what I personally have lived through in the last 3 years, and many, many people I know feel the same. We've lived through something horrific. What humanity can do, what the Israeli soldiers have done to the people of Palestine. They are still denying aid. They are still withholding baby formula milk when babies are starving in Gaza. They're inflicting torture on Palestinian prisoners. They are murdering their healthcare workers. They are torturing and detaining incredibly heroic Palestinian doctors and surgeons who are just trying to save children's lives in Gaza. And what we have witnessed has been so horrific. So, really, when you ask yourself the big questions in life, what does it really matter? My career as against those things. I just feel that we have one life, and it's up to you to stand up and speak about what you believe in. And if that sounds sort of pompous or earnest, I'm not going to apologize for it, because I just feel, I just need my life. I need to align myself behind what I believe in. And then at least I feel I've done something with this life, otherwise I would not be able to look at myself in the mirror, really, I think many, many more people need to be standing up now. We need to be naming these things. We need to be standing up. I think, bullies can only win if you allow them to win. You need to, I think there's so many ordinary people in Britain who have stood up, who've come out, who have risked a lot to join the protests and so on. And I meet them all the time, and it's a wonderful community. So I feel more supported by that community than I do feel threatened by those who oppose it.
Absolutely, could not agree more with those comments. Absolutely not. Thank you very much for joining us today, Juliet. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, earlier today, I also spoke to Shema Abudalu, one of the Gazan students offered a university place. In fact, 2 places in the UK. She was in Gaza when I spoke to her, and I began by asking her about her plans to come here and study.
Coming to the UK is just like a dream for me, especially nowadays with all the situation happening here in Gaza, and that the education is destroyed by all it means here in Gaza. There's no schools, no college, nowhere to study or nowhere to continue my education. So if I get to the UK, I would be able to continue my journey and to attend university in the UK, which has very suitable environment for me to continue and to channel my dream there.
And how much money is it that you'd need to be able to raise?
I don't know exactly the amount of money, but it's a lot amount of money per student, because in order to get for like the fund, you need to get for like the tuition fund and for the other living experiment in the UK. So it would cost a lot for a student, like maybe £15 for like living expenses only per year.
And obviously, it is a technological-based degree. So you're looking at, I think it's either technology from York or there's computer science at the University of Edinburgh that you've been accepted on. Obviously, so that it's your dream to come here to be able to study, to be able to get even more of an education. What kind of dreams were you looking to fulfill with these kind of qualifications?
I got accepted in AI and computer science course in the University of Edinburgh. So my passion is about tech, and I've been dreaming about it since I was a child, because when I was in high school, I used to see my parents, because both of them are computer engineers. So I was enveloped in this since I was a kid, and I started to love this and have more passionate about it. And then I started to participate and practice in this field. I joined multiple clubs and programs, and last one of them was before the war. I was selected in Tech Girls, which is an exchange program that was held in the United States. So it was like a big opportunity for me, and I think that this is the opportunity that made me what I am currently. So after that, when the war started and everything shattered, I couldn't complete my last year in high school, and it got delayed for 2 years. And finally, after a lot of obstacles, I lost a lot of people. I lost a lot of things in order to be able to achieve this. And then I got my grade 12 degree. And after that, I was able to apply for colleges in the United Kingdom. And then I got accepted in my AI and computer science course in Edinburgh, which is like a dream for me. So I feel like if I was able to get to the United States and to complete United Kingdom, and to complete this course and get this diploma and get this, I will be able to get back to the knowledge and the technological knowledge that I will learn from the UK. I will get back to my country and start and try actually to rebuild Gaza as we used to know, and even higher than this, because everything here is destroyed. So I will try to make and take the thing that I gained from the UK to my people here in Gaza, maybe to renew the educational sector, or maybe the health sector, because everything is shattered right now and destroyed.
One or kind of a broader question, how has the war in general affected not just your education, but the rest of your life as well?
Basically, I feel like the war has affected my life in every point of it, starting from my home, because my home got destroyed. So I'm basically now homeless, and they took away my family from me. I lost my mom, my twin sisters, and my brother, and now I'm alone with my father. And I also, when I lost my mom, I got injured and I was stuck under the rubble for 3 hours, and I wasn't able to move for like a month because of this, because I got injured in my leg. And also it has affected my mental health and also my physical health, because after I lost my mom and after like everything was happening, because like I was living in this environment where there's not even a moment that I got to stay like quiet and safe. Like whenever I blink, something bad happened. So I was really insecure and I was really afraid. Like every moment I live here in Gaza, I live it with fear that I will lost my soul or anyone that I love in the next moment. So I was living in this for like 3 years by now, and the suffer is continue. And also not like even like the shelter and the food and the water were really hard to access, and even like the electricity and internet, it's really hard for me to even attend this interview today because there's no electricity and internet in my home. So I got to go to a cafe, to like internet cafe in order to attend this, where I have to to pay like insanely pricey price in order to get like an internet connection. And also I got to like walk for miles. This is like for like my personal life and my educational life. It got affected me a lot because since the war started, we stopped learning because they destroyed like the schools, and they even killed like teachers and professors. So it was really hard to continue the my journey, like my grade 12. So I got to take like lessons online in order to complete this stage, and even attending the classes were really difficult. So if you think about it, you could find the suffer in everything like we do. And what really made me sad, because these are like really simple things that everyone should have. Like it's all right to learn, to live peacefully, to sleep at night without like waking up in like a horrible sound, and without having a bad news about your loved one. So war has traumatized me.
I mean, these are a lot of things that everyone, outside of the kind of the wars of the world at the moment, they take for granted, and it's difficult to be able to understand quite how that would feel, given the relative safety that all of us live in the UK. And lastly, I'd just like to say, what would you say to the people watching at home? How can they help? And not just obviously yourself as well, in terms of the fundraiser, but also in terms of what's happening in Gaza more broadly.
I can say that this campaign is a really good one, and I would say like my message to the people that they keep up with this and that they support this campaign and try to share it as widely as they could, because they don't know how much this campaign would affect the lives people here in Gaza, because there's like 200 students and even more that are having an acceptance in university, but they don't have the enough funds for that will allow them to attend the university. So this campaign and this occasion would help a lot of people and would change their lives, basically, because here we live like this opportunity would mean a lot for everyone living here. So I would advise everyone that watching this to try to look more and to get more information about this occasion, and to try to like donate or share or do like any little thing that they could do, because everything matter and every voice count and every donation count. And I'm really happy that there's a lot of people thinking about us, especially for the celebration that attending this occasion today. This would be like a really beautiful thing and would really change someone's life.
That was Shema Abudalo speaking to me earlier today. The received wisdom is that politics is hard. But if you're Zach Polanski, you'd be forgiven for thinking the opposite. Gifted with natural charm, charisma, and with his former career as an actor preparing him with all the soft skills necessary, it's easy to see how he'd take to politics like a duck to water. It's been 10 months since he was elected leader of the Green Party in a landslide victory, and he's had quite the meteoric rise since then. It only took 7 months into his term as leader of him to take the party from the respectable 7% in the polls the party achieved at the previous general election to registering the first poll lead ever for the party in April this year. It's not just Polanski to thank for these successes. A slick social media campaign alongside an army of canvassers gave the party a crushing victory in the Gorton and Denson by-election, as well as the discovery of another political talent in the form of their candidate Hannah Spencer. Should this have been a surprise to anyone, though? The fertile ground for a party of the populist left was made ready and available for Polanski and co to move into when former Labour leader Keir Starmer purged anyone to the left of Gerhard Schröder from the Labour Party, and then he also dragged his party firmly to the right on a number of issues. There was a wellspring of post-Corbyn socialist sentiment available for the Greens to tap into, especially among the youth, amongst whom, at time of recording, the Greens still poll in first with, and they had been gifted to them willingly by the Starmer regime. Remember this?
If you don't like that, if you don't like the changes that we've made, I say the door is open and you can leave.
And on the subject of Starmer, not only were the Greens gifted a nascent supporter base, they were also gifted possibly the worst political operator possible as an opponent. Endless policy gaffes and manifesto breaches, coupled with hilariously bad political antennae that made him the most hated Prime Minister since records began, Starmer raised the profile of all of his political opponents merely by proxy, especially at a time of deteriorated living standards and a broken economic system that's creaking at the seams. Let's be frank, the Green Party have been playing politics on easy mode for quite a while now. Not only was there a confluence of favourable conditions for them to cannibalise the voter base of the Labour Party, their previous status as a minor party shielded them from a great deal of media scrutiny that would stymie the successes of a mainstream party. Polanski and co have been able to bypass the mainstream media and talk directly to voters via social media, of which Fleet Street have been very slow to catch up with. Another arena where Zach Polanski's charisma has been a real boon to the party. All of this culminated in record gains for the Green Party at May's local elections and the eventual toppling of Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. And now the real politics begins. Gone are the days of easily dunking on an adenoidal PM proclaiming his father was a drill bit. The government has finally put an actual human in charge of the country with functioning emotions, heaven forfend. The rhetoric and policy have also shifted too. It's clear Burnham's team have recognised Labour's polling bleed to their left and have parked their tanks on Polanski's lawn. Remember the Green slogan of making hope normal again? Well, Andy Burnham is bringing back hope. He even borrowed lines from Hannah Spencer's victory speech in Gorton and Denton around the struggles of not being able to afford simple luxuries during the cost of living crisis. Burnham's first week policy blitz has catapulted his favourability ratings higher than any leader in years. Plus 19 is practically unheard of in this era of fractured politics. Whether it's a honeymoon period or not, it's clear that a renewed focus on the cost of living has immediately curried favour with voters. Direct relief for small businesses and the economically precarious are the kind of policies that are Polanski's bread and butter, and given the precipitous drop in Labour's support among these demographics previously, the Greens will need to up their game to keep them on side now that Labour has somewhat reverted to type on economic policy. Being combative rather than collaborative on policies that are shared between the two leaders is unlikely to prove popular given the public appetite for politicians working together on shared goals. Voters tend to give new PMs the benefit of the doubt, and coming out swinging immediately could look unfair potentially in the eyes of the electorate. If the Greens want to bring him back down to earth, they'll need to force him onto ground he's significantly less comfortable on, such as climate change, civil liberties and foreign policy, where the Greens hold something closer to median opinion on than the government. It's clear that the Greens aren't used to having to respond to narrative setting elsewhere. It was extremely easy to be the aggressor against Keir Starmer, who spent 6 years letting everyone else dictate the terms of the debate. But Burnham's more effective use of social media and direct focus on the quick wins for people's pockets may prove a more difficult beast to slay, especially after he ditched some of the predecessor's more unpopular policies, such as digital ID and jury reforms. And it's not just the opposing parties that are setting the terms of the debate either. Now the Greens have been established as a serious electoral force, they're being subject to significantly more scrutiny than they were a couple of years ago. Whilst some of these things will be easier to rise above, such as ridiculous resurrection of Polanski's decades-old career as a hypnotherapist, others have caught the public's attention more vividly, such as the media storm around Polanski's retweeted criticism of the officer who apprehended the Golders Green suspect. More recently, he's got himself in hot water yet again, after carelessly accepting a collaboration request on an Instagram carousel in which a photo of a man wearing a t-shirt with a picture of a guillotine and what appeared to be a veiled reference to Nigel Farage in it, just days after another Reform politician was murdered in her home as well. The legacy media had a field day on the subject, leading to pretty surreal moments like this one on Newsnight, where Nicholas Watt started live reporting angry texts from Reform Party.
Have got reaction from Reform UK to your interview with Zach Polanski, and a senior Reform UK source has said to me, it's truly astonishing and quite frankly sickening that Zach Polanski won't apologise for inciting murder. He admits it was wrong, he admits it's dangerous, but he still refuses to apologise. Mr. Polanski, this Reform UK source says to me, is not fit to lead a national political party.
Now, regardless of whether Green Party supporters view the criticism as legitimate or not, it's a distraction from policy and the hard work of Green representatives to have to constantly firefight concocted media drama around tweets. And there has to be an acknowledgement by the party that serious polling figures require a serious approach to politics. Disgruntled party members have apparently briefed journalists that they think Zach Polansky is, quote, terminally online and needs to hand over the keys to his social media accounts. His excessive use of social media hasn't gone unnoticed by journalists either.
Zach Polansky is a terminally online political figure. And that has been an asset. To some extent, it has explained his rise. During that period of the doldrums of the Labour government and the Keir Starmer government, his using his social media content, which was so crisp and had such clarity and had such a clear message, it propelled them up the polls extremely quickly. And it managed to appeal to a disaffected left populist vote in the country that basically hadn't been spoken for and to since the days of Jeremy Corbyn. But you can have too much of a good thing. And you can see in terms of Polansky, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I sort of notice myself sometimes when I'm tweeting or putting something out, one of the first people who often likes it or sometimes retweets it is Zach Polansky. And that happens once and you think, oh, that's quite nice. He's paying attention to what you're saying. But when it happens the sort of second, third, fifth, 10th, 100th time, you're like, mate, have you not got anything better to be doing than retweeting my stuff? Don't get me wrong. It's excellent. But you know what I mean?
Now, I will be the first to say, briefing to journalists about your misgivings for your own party is the opposite of serious politics. Anyone who's been involved with the Labour Party will tell you that. But neither is accepting every collaboration request or retweeting every supporter's post on social media. The Greens have money now, they're the second biggest party in the country, and a dedicated social media team available to produce content with consistency of direction and prudence of engagement is paramount to taking the Greens from one-time insurgents to a political mainstay. The last area where the Greens have to also adapt is the new environment on policy. When you're an insurgent, it's all about talking to your own people. And so far, they've been excellent on raising the salience of policies such as wealth taxes, rent controls, and actions against Israel's genocide in Gaza. But once you've become a mainstream party, your policies have to appeal to those outside of your own coalition. And they have to be defended against your opponents, such as this moment on ITV's Peston.
We live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but you can speak to almost anyone and people know that they don't feel wealthier. Their bills are going up, their wages aren't going up. We're seeing people struggle. We're seeing nurses queuing up at food banks. So it's just not working. And actually, we need a fundamentally different economic system.
Are you going to help those people if you drive entrepreneurs abroad? The very people who create... Well, I think there's a lot of evidence. In fact, we've been seeing it over the last couple of years.
Switzerland has a wealth tax, a place with famously known
tiny
for having,
wealth tax.
Well, let's look at Spain and its solidarity
in fact,
tax.
I think the vast majority, 3/4 of the countries that had wealth taxes in the 1990s have scrapped them because they didn't work. And what they found is actually they were driving away the very people they needed to create jobs in the economy.
And when you hear these points, you need to have like a real, like constructive and real kind of critical analysis of the kind of points that Jeremy Hunt is making here. Now, it's true, plenty of people in the country are already bought into a wealth tax on the grounds of inequality alone. But when you hear points such as stymie economic growth and investment, those things need to be counted for in their own terms. Luckily, we have the data to understand this. You look at Norway's tax, in which they increased the rate just recently, and only 2% of millionaire wealth left the country, and still led to an increase in revenue and an increase in equality within the country. That's been a continual policy in Norway, and it's not been scrapped necessarily because they didn't work, quote unquote, as Jeremy Hunt said, but lots of ones have been scrapped elsewhere purely on political reasons, rather than necessarily because it's economically unproductive. And in Norway, people who invest in productive businesses, the people who Jeremy Hunt regards as wealth creators, something I would also dispute, probably a subject for another time, but those business investments aren't even regulated by this wealth tax. It is for people who are landlords. It's people who own massive collections of classic cars or people who have massive share portfolios. Those are the people who are heavily targeted by Norway's wealth tax. It's continually existed. They've raised the rate just recently, and it's still generating revenue for the state of Norway. And you need to have points like this memorized so that you can retort in the best way possible when people try and take down your policies. Now, there was also this very excruciating moment on the Makerfield by-election debate on Question Time too.
Well done. But one thing I do want to say is that the idea of blaming our housing crisis on immigration is absolutely wild to me, actually.
Robert, that says more about you because we've got an extra 10, 20 million people come in the country.
Do you think that if
do you not think an extra 10 million people is going to have an effect on housing?
Do you think that if we lock down our borders, we're going to solve the housing crisis?
Well,
is that going to solve it?
The thing is, the more people you have in a country, the more houses you're going to need. I know it might sound...
He's really good at explaining things like this, isn't he?
I'll make sure.
Yeah. You using immigration on the issue of housing I think it's absolutely.
Are you saying it has no impact on housing?
I think Andy wanted to come in.
Do you want to just answer that question, Rob? Do you think it has no impact on
immigration have an effect on housing?
Whoever lives in this country has an impact on housing, of course.
And again, this has been a continual point made by the right, and you have to have a proper riposte. You need to understand where these points are coming from. Has immigration led to an increase in house prices? It has done. The question is whether the extent of immigration is actually having a significant impact. And the evidence says, no, it isn't. First of all, worth pointing out, one of the things that we do have is an aging population, which means the population will have to increase, whether it's by an increase in birth rate or immigration coming in. An increasing population will always increase the number of houses that you need. Have we built enough houses? Well, broadly, we've been underbuilding houses for a very long time. But in terms of the number of houses per capita in this country, that's continued to increase and has continued to increase from a much lower kind of position that it was previously to a much higher position now. When you look at the actual impact in terms of how immigration affects house prices, like only 6% of the house prices we've seen increase over the last 30 years, studies have shown is going to be down to migration. We actually have 15 million spare bedrooms in this country. And lots of these cases are because of older people not downsizing because of the potential impact of things like stamp duty and not having enough bungalows available for them to move into. I mean, we have a very inefficient distribution of how people live in this country because of changing living arrangements. Also, people are staying single for longer, meaning they cohabit or they need more single person flats rather than single family houses, meaning, again, we have an insufficient distribution of houses or people per house. These are significantly greater impacts on house prices, especially since migrants often cohabit in larger families and single houses in a way that we in this country who aren't immigrants really don't. That's been a kind of cultural difference there. So the immigration impact really isn't that high in this country. And unless you have those things memorized and you understand the ripostes in terms of these responses, you're not going to be able to properly respond when people bring up their own perspectives on things such as the housing crisis, as we saw in that clip there. Now, all the major parties have started preparing for the next election. The Greens need to start preparing too. And that doesn't just mean having the sound bites ready on policies people want. It means being able to defend those policies publicly and to build a full prospectus for government on every key policy area. As policy within the Green Party is decided by members, the process can be kind of slow and unwieldy. No, that's not a bad thing. I really like the member democracy in the Green Party. I think it's a good thing. Now, it does mean that the work on getting these things tied down has to happen sooner rather than later. Dalia, do you think that the Green Party need a change of strategy, given that there's a new Prime Minister in place, or do you think we can see the Green Party move in the same direction they've been going in before?
Yeah, I do think that the territory has certainly changed. I mean, on the one hand, I do think it's important to understand that there is no acceptable socialist to the British press. And so we will never be in a situation where, you know, we have a prominent socialist politician who is not being attacked by the press. There's no way to eliminate the likelihood of hit pieces, and particularly kind of unfair and frivolous hit pieces. And so far, I think that Polanski has dealt with that quite well, because he sort of refused to cower in the face of these hit pieces. He often draws attention to it and calls it out for what it is, which is a distraction. So he kind of uses the weight of the press against itself. And I think that has broadly been quite effective. But I do think that now we are in a different territory now that we have Burnham as head of the Labour Party. First of all, I think that now that Burnham's been elected, the press really want to kind of declare Polanski dead. And I also think that Burnham is a lot savvier than perhaps we give him credit for. I think it's not just that Starmer was really bad. I think that Burnham also has a very keen understanding of politics. I think the fact that when the transition of power was happening from Corbynism to Starmerism, he kind of identified quite early on, I need to take myself out of this, because the next few years are going to be really messy and they're going to be really destructive. If I take my hat out the ring for the next 5 years, I can reap the rewards of that later down the line. But I also think that the Greens are, and I agree with you, the Greens are now a very serious force in politics and they need to take themselves seriously. And I think that it's very important that they remain a serious force in politics, because even though now that Burnham is leader of the Labour Party, the chances of the next election being a Reform versus Green dynamic is probably lower. I mean, it was always quite far-fetched, but I think now it is definitely lower, especially if Burnham does spend the next few years actually making advances on bread and butter issues, then the prospect of that has decreased quite a bit. But one thing that Reform has definitely showed us, and Nigel Farage as a political operator has showed us, is that you don't even have to have a single elected MP to be able to really shape and influence the political landscape and the political spectrum in this country. I'm not saying that that's a great thing. You know, it would be great if we had like a functioning democracy where you could actually be represented in Parliament, not just by two parties that just kind of pass the baton to and from one another. But we have learned from Nigel Farage and his various political vehicles that you can create quite a significant centre of gravity outside of the two main political parties that genuinely shapes what those political parties do. And I think it's very important going forward that the Labour Party never, ever, ever rests on the belief that it can take its base for granted, and that the left and that young people and progressive people are a kind of nuisance or are a fleas that you can shake off when you think it's politically expedient. And a strong Green Party, a viable Green Party, a Green Party that takes itself seriously, that has a serious electoral and comm strategy, is absolutely essential. So what I'm trying to say is that even if the Greens' electoral prospects don't look as good under a Burnham leadership than perhaps they did under a Starmer leadership, there is still a vital role for the Greens to play in our political system. And because I'm not someone who is first and foremost committed to any political party, I'm committed to getting the best political programme, the most just political programme for Britain and also for all the people in the world who are impacted by what Britain does. And from that perspective, a healthy and strong and savvy Green Party can actually get a lot done, even if they might not be as close to an electoral victory as they were under Starmer, because Starmer made it so easy.
I mean, we literally left the European Union because
Exactly.
the Conservative Party was scared of losing votes to UKIP, which happened. You have 12% of the vote in 2015, I think UKIP did.
Yeah.
That's a significant chunk of the Conservative vote share they were scared of, as well as internal party politics. And that's how we got one of the biggest constitutional changes in this country in decades and decades and decades, right? You can have plenty of effect on politics from outside the system, where I think you're absolutely right. And I think the press kind of haven't talked about the fact that Keir Starmer is no longer Prime Minister because of Zach Polansky.
Exactly.
Right? This is a really important point that never gets mentioned at all. There's a huge omerta on it, which is that, as has been pointed out by John Curtis, it seems the only person on the BBC who's pointed this out, which was that the biggest kind of vote migration between 2024 and 2026 local elections was Labour to Green. That was the biggest migration. That caused Labour to lose seats in London and inner cities, but it also caused them to lose seats elsewhere due to a split vote allowing Reform or the Tories to come up through the middle. This is the biggest migration of voters, and without Zach Polansky having some way of being able to criticise Keir Starmer, bring those voters over, remember, like, the young person's vote, I think in terms of vote share was like between 40 and 47% for Labour at the last election. It's now sub 20. If you look at, or at least when under Keir Starmer, it was sub 20 when you looked at the crosstabs on a lot of the polling companies, showing really like the absolute cratering of their support amongst young people was very, very real. And this is why Keir Starmer was forced to step down. They lost the local elections. He was forced out. This does not happen without there being an insurgent force finding some home for the people who've been disabused by Starmerism.
And it's not only that Keir Starmer was forced to step down, it was that his replacement was to the left of him. Because there's another world in which Keir Starmer could have been forced to step down and parachuted in his place would have been Wes Streeting. That actually looked very likely at one point. But it was specifically the fact that he was swapped out with Andy Burnham, who is to the left of Starmer, that shows you the impact that you can have. And that's why I think we shouldn't get too preoccupied with, is it likely that the Greens are going to win the next election? Or is it like that? That's not the point. The point is that we need to have a really strong gravitational pull outside of the Labour Party that makes the Labour Party scared of losing the left. Because it has always rested on its laurels that they have nowhere else to go. There's always been this thing of like, the left aren't going anywhere, they have nowhere else to go, so we basically don't have to give them any concessions. And that has changed. And that is really, really powerful and really important. And I have to agree with you as well, Helena, that like, as much as perhaps, you know, being terminally online might be a problem, I think this briefing from within the party to the press has, if any of you are listening, has got to stop.
And we've already seen how damaging this was for the Labour Party. Like, so
It's
much stuff
toxic.
that just come out of, you know, McSweeney Towers, presumably, or whatever it is. I mean, to the point where Sue Gray had to tell people in the actual kind of, in number 10, you have to stop briefing. It looks terrible.
It's
and
toxic,
all it does is...
it makes you look unserious. And it takes the potential of political power that you can have out. Because it's not like... Because the reason that people brief is because they want to weaken... There's a factional war within a party, and they're like, I'm going to brief to the press so I can like weaken my factional opponent. In reality, it makes the whole thing look like a joke. So it actually doesn't have the intent, the impact that you think it's going to have.
Like, how many Labour right MPs lost their seats in 2019 because people from their same faction were briefing stupid shit to the press to try and make sure that Jeremy Corbyn lost the election.
And especially when you're talking about the Green Party, which is only really just arriving to mainstream politics. Like, you have to convince the public that you are a serious party that can be a mainstream player. And you don't do that by looking like a divided clown show.
100%. There needs to be a actual kind of unity of purpose. And I get, in this case, I think it was probably something quite small. Like, lots of people understood that I think that maybe the social media stuff did go too far, right?
Yeah.
But this is, you know, a barometer for where this could go in the future. And absolutely right. Even at the first point of call, when we see these briefings start to happen, like, the people who are involved, they just have to stop and learn the press are the enemy. If you're a political party, it doesn't matter what political party you're from, unless you're potentially the Conservative party, right? Especially if you're a Socialist party or even an ecological party, given how much money from the petrochemical industry sloshes around the media these days, right? The press are the enemy, and you have to treat them like them. Even if it's someone who presumably might be somewhat aligned to you, maybe even like The Guardian, there are still people there who want to take you down for their perceived political interest, or indeed for viral interest.
For a good story.
For a good story, for good copy. Yeah. That's more important than the political ends and means of what happens to the country overall, because that is not the concern of the media in this country, at least not the mainstream or legacy media. 100%. Thank you very much, Dalia, for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Helena.
And thank you, Stephen, for joining us earlier as well. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in today too. Come back tomorrow for another live stream from 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.